Greetings and welcome to Phantom's Edge. This will be Chapter 12 of this reading. Early morning rose to the captain as he opened his eyes to the ceiling. He glanced over at the commander he laid with, kissed her once as she continued to slumber, then headed out to try and form the blades he wanted brought into the military. He dressed himself in his uniform, took the notes on the table, and was off to find a blacksmith that wasn't in league with the Bureau. Doing so would cause a report to be made and, eventually, would be brought to his superior's attention and traced back to the Mustel. Akmir traveled to the other side of the city from headquarters and stumbled upon a male Rodenia who was known to those around him as the best in quality for a blacksmith. However, he wasn't known to make any shape or form of weapons, only construction tools. The captain went over to the Rodenia smithing stand and asked, "You, Joseph?" The man in question was a large white-furred porcupine with black at the last 2 inches of his quills. His French blue eyes always had that mean gaze to them, making those that faced him believe he never laughed at anything assumed to be a joke. Oddly enough, he was favored amongst those within the city he communed in for his work and his loyal friendship. The Rodenia turned to the Bureau soldier, having to stop from his hammering of a heated piece of metal, and replied, "That be me, stranger. What can I do you for?" The captain smiled as he glanced around the stand and said, "I was thinking you'd make a long, sharp tool for me, but it seems all I have to do is pluck a quill from you." Akmir laughed at his idiotic joke, since no one else would, while the Rodania just stared at the Mustel with an emotionless expression. Noticing the smith not laughing, Akmir stopped himself and was back to normal as he said, "Never mind, vermin, just tell me if you can make a few weapons for me." "Doesn't the military already have blacksmiths?" Akmir glanced around, then looked back at the stand owner and said, "This is something that has to bypass the bureaucracy's eyes until I can get it approved." Joseph just glared at the soldier for a moment, then said, "Unfortunately, I don't make weapons, sir. I only deal handy tools for those who need them. I'll pay you double what it would take." "Not happening. I'm a simple civilized man, and I will not condone making any militarized items in my stand." "Triple." "You can bribe me all you want, soldier, but I ain't doing what you ask." Akmir glanced around again, then reached for his pistol as he said, "All right then." The Mustel aimed it at the Rodenia, while keeping it out of sight from everyone else as he continued, "Final offer. You make what I want, or I'll find someone else, having ended your life." The smith just stared into the Mustel's eyes as he smiled, sinisterly laughing as he cared not for the weapon before him ready to take his life. The captain looked at the Rodenia confused, and asked, "What's so funny, vermin?" Joseph stopped as he glanced at the jacket to see the Bureau soldier's ranking. Then he looked back at the Mustel and replied, "Well, Captain, I hope you have enough money to pay for this little stunt you're pulling. Name your price." The blacksmith went to cross his arms and responded, 200 pieces. 200? Akmir glanced around once more, then slightly leaned over the counter as he loudly whispered, "Are you insane, vermin?" "Ain't no other blacksmith gonna give you a better offer, Captain. Being dangerous to both you and me, and you're the one trying to go over the Bureau's head, you best be willing to pay the price." The Mustel angrily glanced around one last time, then put his pistol away as he said, "Fine, 200. Joseph reached for a paper and writing quill as he said, "Now we're in business." He wrote down in his listings special order, then looked up and asked, "What do you want? Blade, pistol, something new?" "It'll be a blade, but not of normal quality. You'll have to use new materials to create it." "Give me a list and I'll see what I can do." Akmir reached for his notes, then gave out each element he needed to the blacksmith as he said, "You'll need crystals, ganister, and a mixed metal of iron and charred rock." He then put away the notes, while he continued, "All of that needs to be formed into a saber blade, with a polished gold hilt to make it look nice for the presentation." Want me to wax your ass and give you a back rub as well? The captain glared at the Rodania, knowing he was being sarcastic with his words. Then Joseph continued, "Because this deal ain't happening. No amount of weapon can be made out of that stuff you just pitched to me." Akamir raised his right hand and pointed at the blacksmith as he barked, "The Empire of Lepore made their weapons out of that material, and I want that weaponry for my men, so get it done." He then began walking away from the stand, motioning back to headquarters as his final words to the smith were, "I'll be expecting 2 counts of my order within the next 3 days. Joseph watched the Mustel walk away, then shook his head as he pondered about what to do. After a minute, a whistle came to get his attention. The Rodania looked over to find another suspicious customer, an avifaun woodpecker. Unknown to the blacksmith, this bird was the very same lieutenant that took the real notes from his superior without being noticed. The avifaun walked over to the stand, out of uniform to blend in to the locals, pulling out the stolen notes, while he asked, "Mind if I alter your latest order?" The blacksmith squinted his eyes at the avifaun, yet not wanting to bother understanding, he nodded his head, later moving to write down the fixed order as the lieutenant read off the paper. The real elements for the weapons are crystal mixed with iron, jasperoid, and a heavy amount of granite stone called larvicite. He then put away the notes as he looked back up at the blacksmith and continued, "And yes, those are hard materials to find, but not impossible. What about the other materials your friend gave me? Use them for one sword, but the true elements for the other, and try to offer his the fake one." Joseph gave a blank stare at the soldier, who then continued, "Look, everyone doesn't want to deal with that jackass of a weasel. We can't just get rid of him so easily. He's quite tough against his opponents, and he hasn't really done anything illegal within the Bureau, so he can't be discharged. He plays by the rules, and from what I've seen, a bit too well, which makes him think he can bend them to his will whenever he wants. This might just end it." Joseph raised his left hand at the avifaun as he said, all right, don't go barking at me now. The only thing that you won't be able to get around here is, I know, the Rodania responded as he lowered his hand, the larvicite. Told they only appear around the lands of Mongoma where the Empire resides. Exactly. However, there's a large amount of that the bureaucracy has excavated from the island just before we were forced off. It's been held as evidence ever since and hasn't been touched. I can get it to you, but it won't be me you see next time. Joseph laughed a bit, then turned away to continue at his workstation as he said, "I'll be waiting." With that, the lieutenant commander was off to find the one material the blacksmith needed. Bureau's evidence locker had Mongoma's minerals, yet with the right connections of friends, the avifaun quickly gathered the stones. Leaving no paper trail, he bagged all of what he could find, then took it out of headquarters unnoticed. The lieutenant wandered around for about 12 minutes, trying to find someone willing to take the supplies to the blacksmith he spoke with earlier. He found a little Perseone girl that was willing to help, small and no older than 6, and wanted only a few gold coins for her effort. The lieutenant gave the girl more than what she asked and let her be on her way with the stones, getting help from a few of her adult Perseone friends. Seeing the beggars off, the lieutenant rushed back to headquarters and went to change into his uniform before anyone had noticed, knowing all was set for his superior's return. Just as the avifaun got his jacket on, the final piece of his uniform, Commander Emera said, "There you are, Perry." The lieutenant stood frozen in his tracks, while he looked over to find Captain Akamir, Commander Emera, and Lieutenant Commander Braden, an avifaun black duck. All 3 were sitting around in the living area. Perry's heart began to pound, his thoughts on them somehow having found out about his little scandal he pulled off. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Commander Emera waved her right hand to call Perry over to the group, while she said, "Come, sit down." The avifaun moved to sit next to the lieutenant commander, across from Akamir and Emera. The Mustel lowered her hand as she sat back and continued, We've been looking for you all over headquarters, Lieutenant. Where have you been? Perry hesitated to respond, yet said, kind of wanted to tour around the place a little. I never got to see all of it before. Must have been in different areas when you were looking for me. Oh, well then. Amara moved to reach for a cup of tea, then sat back as she said, just remember to leave a note next time you venture off. Aye, Commander. Brayden looked over at his comrade and said, the commander has suggested that we stay in till we're called back to the meeting room again. Best ask her now if you need anything from outside. No, nothing at all. Amara put her cup down and she said, good, because I was going to deny it anyways, regardless of what you asked for. Perry gave a slight angry expression towards his commander, yet held his tone from showing it as he said, then I'll go rest a little longer, if you don't mind. As the lieutenant motioned for the room he and the lieutenant commander slept in, Commander Emmer raised her cup to ready herself to sip her tea as she closed her eyes. With no care whatsoever to her subordinate, the feminine Mustel said, fine, whatever. Brayden stood and went to head out of the room into the headquarters' halls, while he said, I'm going to go check to see if we have any mail. Again, with no emotion, Emera said, fine, whatever. The Mustel opened her eyes to watch the lieutenant commander shut the doors behind him. Then she looked over at where the lieutenant had gone. Finding the bedroom door shut as well, Emera looked over at her captain and said, I think those two need some time off. Akmir glanced over to the front doors, then looked down at the commander and said, I think they need to start actually working if they expect to stay within the bureaucracy. Emera smiled as she placed her cup on the table before her. Then she moved to lie across the couch on her back and placed her head on Akamir's lap. The captain went to gently pet the right side of the commander's head with his left hand, while staring down into her eyes as she looked up at his. Meanwhile, at the other end of the city, the little girl and her 3 friends that Perry had asked for a favor gave the blacksmith the final materials he needed to make the swords. Afterwards, they left as Joseph went to do his best in making what both the captain and the lieutenant ordered. But Rodania held all other orders aside to get his quota done by the captain's expected time, while also working an hour longer than usual. He was just about done with the swords when a ship came to dock nearby his workstation. Glancing back at it for a moment to see if it were anything along the lines of a carrier ship with more supplies. However, as he was the only one able to recognize this particular vessel, he turned away as he smiled and shook his head slightly. He went to continue his work, unknown to all others that the ship that had docked was none other than a pirate ship. Ecuador. This concludes the reading of Chapter 12. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you liked what you've seen and heard, be sure to check out my other 2 novels, Lore of the Endelment and Ryu the Demon Slayer. Link will be in the description below. Other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you next week reading Chapter 13.